As the first light of dawn began to touch the Seine, a heavy, suffocating silence hung over the Musée d'Art Moderne de Paris. This grand palace of culture, located in the shadows of the Eiffel Tower, was supposed to be an impenetrable fortress. Within its walls sat some of the most significant works of the 20th century, protected by high-tech sensors and a specialized guard force. But something had fundamentally changed during the long, quiet night. On the morning of the 20th of May 2010, the routine security rounds were interrupted by a sight that chilled the hearts of the museum staff. 5 massive frames, once housing the vibrant colors of global masters, stood hauntingly empty against the gallery walls. The masterpieces had been surgically removed with a level of precision that defied belief. There were no signs of a struggle, no shattered glass, and absolutely no blood left at the scene. The victims of this silent heist were not human, but they represented the soul of European modernism. Among the missing items were Le Pigeon au Petit Pois by Pablo Picasso and La Pastorale by Henri Matisse. The list continued with works by Georges Braque, Amedeo Modigliani, and Fernand Léger. Collectively, these 5 paintings were valued at over 100 million euros, making it the largest art theft in the history of the French capital. What baffled the investigators of the Brigade de Répression du Banditisme was the total failure of the museum's multi-million euro security infrastructure. Dozens of motion sensors and sophisticated alarms had remained completely dormant throughout the entire 20-minute duration of the robbery. The intruders had moved through the building like ghosts, seemingly aware of every blind spot and technical flaw. It was as if the museum had simply invited the thieves to take whatever they desired. As the forensic teams began their slow and meticulous sweep, they discovered a single window with its heavy iron bolts corroded by a mysterious chemical substance. This was not the work of a crude smash-and-grab crew, but the signature of a professional who understood materials and mechanics. The perpetrator had entered through a high, difficult opening that would have been impossible for a normal person to reach without specialized climbing gear or incredible strength. News of the heist spread across the globe within hours, sending shockwaves through the international art world and the insurance industry. The French government was left in a state of deep embarrassment as it realized its national treasures were vulnerable to a single, athletic intruder. Public curiosity began to grow around the identity of the mysterious Spider-Man, who could scale walls and bypass high-tech lasers with such effortless and chilling ease. The question that haunted the detectives was not just how the thief got in, but how he had remained so incredibly calm inside. Security footage revealed a lone, dark figure moving with a fluid grace, showing no signs of the panic typical of amateur burglars. He spent time selecting the works, almost as if he were shopping for a personal collection. This was a man who possessed a deep and intimate appreciation for the art he was stealing. This was the beginning of an investigation that would span continents and drag the Parisian underworld into the unforgiving light of the law. The robbery at the Musée d'Art Moderne was more than just a loss of property. It was a psychological blow to the city's identity. The search for the missing canvases would reveal a world of secret collectors, panicked fences, and a mastermind who treated the city's rooftops as his own private highway. As the police cordoned off the square, the empty frames remained as a stark monument to a brilliant and terrifying criminal success. The 100 euros million ascent had been completed, and the Spider-Man of Paris had vanished back into the urban labyrinth with his prizes. The world was left wondering if these masterpieces would ever be seen again, or if they were destined to disappear forever. This was the opening act of a legend built on silken shadows. Vjeran Tomic was born in Paris in 1968. But his legend truly began in the ancient, sun-drenched streets of Mostar. Sent to live with grandparents due to his mother's illness and a father whose presence was more a threat than a comfort, he found freedom in the vertical world. The rugged cliffs of Bosnia and the stone walls of old bridges became his first playground and his primary means of escape from reality. In Mostar, young Vjeran didn't just walk, he ascended with an ease that baffled his peers. He spent his afternoons scaling the steep facades of historical buildings and the jagged limestone outcrops surrounding the city. He learned to trust the strength of his fingers and the balance of his toes, developing an intuitive understanding of stone and gravity. These were the formative years where the Spider-Man was unconsciously being forged. When he returned to Paris at age 11, the City of Light felt like a cold labyrinth of brick and iron. The transition was brutal, marked by a language he had partially forgotten and a father who used violence as a primary form of communication. Tomic felt like an outsider, a boy with the soul of a mountain goat trapped in a crowded urban jungle. He needed a way to rise above the chaos. The zinc rooftops of Paris soon became his sanctuary from the domestic violence and the stifling boredom of the schoolroom. While other children played in the streets, Vjeran was exploring the dizzying heights of the Haussmann-style buildings that defined the city. He discovered that the world looked different from 80 feet up, peaceful, silent, and entirely vulnerable to someone with the courage to climb. The heights offered him a sense of total control. His criminal career didn't start with masterpieces, but with the small, shiny treasures hidden in the apartments of the wealthy. He realized that the rich often left their windows unlocked on the upper floors, never imagining a human being could reach them without a ladder. His first burglaries were acts of rebellion and survival, fueled by a desire to take back a piece of the world that had rejected him so harshly. As he entered his 20s, Tomic transformed from a delinquent into a specialized urban predator with a distinct and terrifying method. He didn't use crowbars or explosives to enter a building. He used his body and a length of climbing rope. He could scale a 5-story apartment block in minutes, moving with the silence of a shadow across the slate. He was becoming a phantom of the Parisian night. The Spider-Man nickname was a reflection of his physical reality on the vertical plane of the city. Witnesses occasionally caught a glimpse of a dark figure clinging to a limestone wall with impossible ease, disappearing into the night before the sirens could even be heard. This mythic status only fueled his confidence, pushing him to attempt more daring and complex missions in the very heart of the French capital. Unlike his peers in the criminal world, Tomic possessed a strange and genuine aesthetic sensibility that set him apart from common thugs. He would often spend minutes inside an apartment, simply admiring the paintings or the view from the balcony before taking a single item. He saw himself as a connoisseur of beauty, a man who only took what was worthy of his extraordinary and dangerous efforts. From the perspective of a mastermind, every building was a puzzle to be solved, and every security sensor was a challenge to be bypassed. He studied architectural blueprints and learned how to navigate the complex internal structures of the city's grandest institutions. He was no longer just a thief. He was a high-altitude engineer of the illegal, preparing for the one heist that would eventually stun the entire world. By 2010, the Spider-Man had reached the peak of his physical and technical powers, ready for his ultimate performance in the dark. The boy from Mostar had mastered the heights of Paris, and now he had his eyes set on the most prestigious target of all. The transition from luxury apartments to national museums was about to begin, setting the stage for a century-defining theft that would haunt French history. The heist began long before the first shadow touched the museum's walls on that fateful May night. For 6 nights leading up to the robbery, Vjeran Tomic had been a ghost in the darkness, systematically preparing his entry point. He didn't use brute force. He used chemistry and patience. Applying a powerful acid to the bolts of a heavy window frame, he waited for the metal to weaken, slowly loosening the path into the sanctuary of modern art. On the night of the 20th of May 2010, at approximately 3:50 a.m., Tomic made his final approach. He moved with the fluid precision of an apex predator, scaling the exterior of the Musée d'Art Moderne with effortless grace. When he reached the pre-treated window, the bolts gave way with a muffled metallic groan. He slipped inside the dark gallery, his feet barely making a sound as they touched the polished hardwood floors of the museum. Tomic stood perfectly still for several minutes, waiting for the wail of sirens or the heavy boots of security guards. To his utter astonishment, the silence remained unbroken. The museum's sophisticated motion sensors, which had been malfunctioning for weeks, failed to register his presence entirely. He was a phantom in a high-tech fortress that had forgotten how to defend itself. The Spider-Man realized he was no longer a thief. He was a guest in an empty palace. The original mission was a contract for a specific piece, Fernand Léger's Still Life with Candlestick. A shady middleman had promised a significant payout for this single masterpiece. Tomic located the Léger quickly, expertly slicing the canvas from its heavy frame with a steady hand. But as he looked around the desolate, moonlit gallery, he felt a strange sense of artistic greed and opportunity. The air was too still, and the art was too beautiful to leave behind. Instead of retreating with his single prize, Tomic began a shopping spree that would haunt French cultural history forever. He moved from room to room, his eyes scanning the walls for the most iconic names in the history of art. He was not just looking for value, he was looking for the soul of modernism. His selections were not random. They were the choices of a man who understood the weight of the masters he was about to steal. He approached Pablo Picasso's Le Pigeon au Petit Pois, a cubist masterpiece of immense historical importance. With the same clinical efficiency, he removed the canvas, feeling the weight of the history he held in his hands. Next came Henri Matisse's La Pastorale, followed by Amedeo Modigliani's Haunting Woman with a Fan. Finally, he selected Georges Braque's Olive Tree near a stack. He was assembling a collection that no private billionaire could ever legally own. The entire operation took less than 20 minutes, a staggering feat of criminal composure, while the museum's 3-night guards sat in their security booth, mesmerized by their monitors. Tomic was rolling up millions of euros in canvas just a few corridors away. He didn't rush, and he didn't panic. He treated the act of theft as a meditative performance, carefully handling each painting to ensure no damage occurred to the fragile surfaces. What fascinated investigators later was the acid breach technique. By using a corrosive liquid rather than a drill or a hammer, Tomic ensured that the vibration sensors on the windows were never triggered. It was a sophisticated, low-tech solution to a high-tech problem. This level of preparation showed that the Spider-Man was not just an athlete. He was a tactical engineer who understood the physical vulnerabilities of modern security systems. As he prepared to exit, Tomic looked back at the 5 empty frames hanging like open wounds on the gallery walls. He felt no remorse, only the intense adrenaline of the climb and the satisfaction of a job perfectly executed. He exited through the same window, sliding down the side of the building with 5 of the world's most precious treasures tucked securely into his backpack. He vanished into the Parisian fog before the guards even noticed the breeze. The exit was as silent as the entry. He reached the street, hopped on his scooter, and blended into the early morning traffic of a city just beginning to wake up. Behind him, the Musée d'Art Moderne remained a silent witness to a 100 euros million vacuum. The Spider-Man had achieved the impossible, turning a simple burglary into a legendary heist that defied the very definition of security. The 20 minutes in the dark had changed art history forever. For over a year, the investigation into the heist of the century remained at a frustrating and silent standstill. Despite the international scale of the crime, the Spider-Man had left virtually no DNA or forensic clues within the quiet halls of the museum. The French police were chasing a ghost who had mastered the art of invisibility as well as he had mastered the art of climbing. The empty frames mocked the authorities daily. The breakthrough finally arrived through the invisible web of modern telecommunications and digital footprints. Investigators began scouring thousands of cellular signals that had bounced off the towers near the museum on the night of the theft. One specific phone caught their attention, moving with suspicious timing through the Parisian streets at 4 in the morning. This digital breadcrumb led the police directly to a man with a long history of high-altitude burglaries. In May 2011, exactly 1 year after the heist, Vjeran Tomic was arrested in a synchronized police strike. To the surprise of the detectives, the Spider-Man did not maintain a wall of silence for long. He spoke with a certain pride about his athletic feat, describing the climb and the acid-treated window with the precision of a craftsman. However, while he admitted to the theft, the location of the masterpieces remained a mystery. The investigation soon expanded to include the men who had orchestrated the demand for the precious art. Jean-Michel Corvez, a gray market antiques dealer, was identified as the middleman who had originally ordered the hit on the Laguerre painting. Corvez represented the link between the daring thief and the shadowy world of illegal art collectors. The police realized that Tomic was just the hand. The brain was hidden much deeper. The trail eventually led to Jonathan Byrne, a watchmaker and art enthusiast who had been entrusted with hiding the stolen canvases. Byrne was not a hardened criminal, but a man possessed by a dangerous obsession with the beauty of the masters. He kept the rolled-up paintings in his workshop, living in a state of constant fear and exhilaration as he looked upon the stolen Picasso and Matisse in private. As the police net tightened around the conspiracy, The psychological pressure on Vjeran reached a terrifying breaking point. When Tomic and Corvez were arrested, Vjeran realized it was only a matter of time before the authorities knocked on his door. Panic, fueled by the prospect of a long prison sentence, began to override his appreciation for the art. He made a decision that would horrify the global cultural community. During his interrogation, Vjeran made a shocking and tearful confession that sent waves of despair through the art world. He claimed that in a moment of pure, blind panic, he had shredded the 5 masterpieces and thrown them into a common green dumpster. He told the investigators that the €100 million worth of history had been carted away by a garbage truck and incinerated in a suburban landfill. The detectives and museum curators were devastated by the possibility that these irreplaceable treasures were gone forever. However, a deep skepticism remained among the experts who believed that no art lover could truly destroy such beauty. They suspected that Vjeran was telling a convenient lie to protect a secret buyer or to prevent the paintings from ever being recovered. The dumpsters were searched, but the ash revealed no secrets. The shadow of destruction cast a long, dark pall over the entire legal proceeding and the public's perception. If Vjeran's story was true, the Spider-Man's greatest achievement had resulted in the permanent mutilation of human heritage. The connection between the thief, the middleman, and the fence had been broken by fear, leaving the world to mourn paintings that might only exist as memories. The search for the truth became as difficult as the climb. In 2017, the Palais de Justice in Paris became the stage for a final confrontation between the Spider-Man and the state. Vjeran Tomic appeared not as a broken criminal, but as a man who had already accepted his destiny. The courtroom was packed with journalists, eager to see the man who had bypassed a multi-million euro security system with nothing but acid and a rope. It was the end of a long, vertical journey. Throughout the trial, Tomic's demeanor was unsettlingly calm and articulate, often discussing the art with more passion than the lawyers. He spoke of the 5 masterpieces with a sense of intimate familiarity, as if they were old friends he had temporarily borrowed. This lack of remorse, combined with his undeniable intelligence, created a complex image of a man who viewed himself as an artist rather than a common thief. The judicial system, however, was not moved by the romantic narrative of the high-climbing outlaw or his refined aesthetic tastes. Tomic was sentenced to 8 years in prison, while his accomplices, Jean-Michel Corvez and Jonathan Vjeran, received slightly shorter terms for their roles. Most staggering was the financial penalty, a collective fine of €104 million, a debt that would haunt the trio for the rest of their lives. Despite the heavy sentence, a large section of the French public couldn't help but feel a lingering sense of admiration for Tomic's methods. He was frequently compared to Arsène Lupin, the fictional gentleman thief who used wit and skill instead of weapons and brutality. In a world of violent crime, the image of a man scaling walls to steal beauty possessed a strange, archaic charm that captured the national imagination. The ultimate tragedy of the case remains the unresolved fate of the 5 missing masterpieces, which officially remain lost to history. Many experts still find Jonathan Vjeran's story of the green dumpster and the garbage truck to be fundamentally impossible to believe. There is a persistent hope that the Picasso and the Matisse are not ash, but are resting in the climate-controlled basement of a secret, unscrupulous collector. For the global museum community, the Spider-Man heist was a brutal wake-up call that exposed the lethal combination of technical failure and human complacency. Security protocols were completely overhauled across Europe, with a new focus on preventing the acid breach techniques that Tomic had popularized. The empty frames at the Musée d'Art Moderne served as a permanent scar, reminding curators that no fortress is truly impregnable to a determined mind. Following his release from prison, Tomic's story found a new life through the lens of modern media and international streaming platforms. The 2023 documentary Vjeran Tomic, The Spider-Man of Paris, allowed the aging thief to narrate his own legend to a global audience. He remains a polarizing figure, standing at the intersection of extraordinary physical talent and the cold reality of criminal selfishness. He is a man defined by the climb. As we analyze the mastermind perspective, the story of Vjeran Tomic is a study in the danger of unchallenged skill and uncurbed ambition. He proved that a single individual with enough focus could bypass the collective defenses of a modern nation-state. Yet, the destruction or disappearance of the art reminds us that the ego of the thief often outweighs the value of the culture he claims to admire. Today, the skyline of Paris remains a playground of stone and slate, but it is a landscape that is more carefully watched than ever before. Vjeran Tomic can no longer scale the heights of his youth, yet his influence still hangs over the rooftops like a silent shadow. He is the man who turned a museum into a vault of empty frames, a legacy that will never be fully erased from the city. In the final analysis, the Spider-Man of Paris is a legend of both brilliance and loss, a man who reached for the stars and left behind a void. The 5 masterpieces remain absent, a haunting reminder that some things, once taken, could be truly replaced by justice or time. The heist of the century ended in a prison cell, but the mystery of the €100 million ascent lives on.